Okay. Good morning, Year 6. It is Tuesday, the 12th of January. I hope you're all well this morning and raring to go. Today, we are continuing with our work on Giant's Necklace, and we're going to be looking in particular at settings. So we're going to be describing one setting, but in two different circumstances. So we're going to be looking at some language, collecting some language to describe this setting before we write using it tomorrow. So let's continue. So we started our story, The Giant's Necklace, yesterday, and I just want you to think back about what has happened in the story so far. You might want to pause the video, just have a little think and a little recap. You might even want to have a look at the text from yesterday again. Okay, so you can see I've put a little picture of some shells. Now they're actually the cowrie shells that we were introduced to yesterday. I wasn't sure if you would all know what they looked like. So we started the book yesterday and we were introduced to Cherry and her family. She comes from a family with 4 brothers and they're on holiday in Cornwall, staying in a little cottage in somewhere called Zennel. Now she has been collecting these cowrie shells. She's making a giant's necklace, you probably remember, and she wants it to reach from the sofa to the toaster. And it's the last day of their holiday and she hasn't got long left and she needs to collect a certain number of shells to complete this necklace. And we know from what is said in the text that Cherry is going to finish it. She's refusing to go home until she's collected these shells to finish this necklace. So let's carry on. Now, it all takes place around a beach called Boat Cove in Zennel, and this is actually Boat Cove down in Cornwall. So you can see it's quite a small little beach, and if you were on top of the cliffs, it would be pretty much hidden. You wouldn't be able to see it. The tide would come in, and there wouldn't be much there. There's a lot of rocks around, and it's quite steep. So, but you can also see that beautiful bluey green Cornish water as well. And this isn't Boat Cove, but it's a kind of similar cove in Cornwall. And looking down, you can see that if the tide was in, you wouldn't really be able to see it. So when they talk about a hidden cove, a hidden beach, that's what they mean, surrounded by these rocks. So we're going to read the next section now, and I would like you to listen out for any language which describes Boat Cove, because that's the setting that we're going to try and collect language for today. Now, you might have printed out the text, so you could underline or highlight sections which describe the beach as we read, but don't worry if you haven't printed it out, you can listen and jot down ideas on paper or just keep them in your head. Let's carry on. Boat Cove, just below Zennel Head, was the beach they had found and occupied every year for as long as Cherry could remember. They had rented the same granite cottage, set back in the fields below the Eagle's Nest. And every year they came to the same beach because no one else did. In 2 weeks, not another soul had ventured down the winding path through the bracken from the coastal path. It was a long climb down and a very much longer one up. The beach itself was almost hidden from the path that ran along the cliff top 100 feet above it. It was private and perfect and bare. The boys swam in amongst the rocks, diving and snorkeling for hours on end. Her mother and father would sit side by side on stripy deck chairs. She would read endlessly and he would close his eyes against the sun and dream for hours on end. Cherry moved away from them and clambered over the rocks to a narrow strip of sand in the cove beyond. The shells, and here it was that she mined for the cowrie shells. In the gritty sand under the cliff face, she had found a particularly rich deposit. She was looking for pink cowrie shells of a uniform length, colour and shape. That was what took the time. Occasionally, the boys would swim around the rocks and into her little beach, emerging from the sea, all goggled and flippered to mock her. But as she paid them little attention, they soon tired and went away again. She knew time was running short. This was her very last chance to find enough shells to complete the giant's necklace, and it had to be done. The sea was calmer that day than she had ever seen it. The heat beat down from a windless, cloudless sky. Even the gulls and kittiwakes seemed to be silenced by the sun. Cherry searched on. stopping only for a picnic lunch of pasties and tomatoes with the family before returning at once to her shells. In the end, the heat proved too much for her mother and father, who left the beach earlier than usual in mid-afternoon to begin to tidy up the cottage. The boys soon followed because they had grown tired of finding miniature crabs and seaweed instead of the sunken wrecks and treasure that they'd been seeking. So by tea time, Cherry was left on the beach on her own with strict instructions to keep her hat on, not to bathe alone, and to be back well before dark. She had calculated she needed 150 more cowrie shells, and so far she'd only found 80. She would be back, she insisted, when she had finished collecting enough shells, and not before. Okay, so I don't know about you, but on this cold, wintry day, I'm longing to be on that beach down in Cornwall. It just sounds idyllic, doesn't it? Anyway, so we have found out a little bit more about Cherry. We know that she is definitely going to be keeping on looking for those shells. So nothing is going to stop her. Now, I would like you to pause the video and have a little think about which words and which descriptive phrases give you some more information about what the beach was like on that afternoon. Okay, so you can see here I have underlined some of the language, and well, you can have a chat about it with somebody near you, or we can chat about it together. So some of the things which I have picked up on. It was private and perfect. That tells me that it's really quiet down on that beach. We already know it's quiet because nobody else has been to that beach for the whole holiday when the family have been there. So we know it's very private. It's like having your own beach all to yourself. It also mentions rocks quite a few times. So the boys swam in amongst the rocks. Cherry is clambering over the rocks everywhere. So that gives us some more information about what the beach was like. And here, the sea was calmer that day than she had ever seen it. The heat beat down from a windless, cloudless sky. It sounds to me like it's one of those days when the sky is a beautiful blue colour, there's not a breath of wind, and it's just really calm and still and peaceful. In fact, it's so calm that it seems like even the birds have stopped making a noise. So it's just really silent. Let's have a little look at anything else. No, I think that's all I wanted. That's all I wanted to talk about from there. But you may have found some other pieces of, or other words and phrases. So I've also popped a little picture of a kittiwake up there in case you weren't sure. It's a bit of an unusual name. So they're actually a little bit like seagulls, and they can be found in Cornwall. So it's just the seagulls and the kittiwakes were all silent. Okay. So what we're going to do now, again, we've done this a lot of times before in class. So you can divide a piece of paper into 4, or this sheet is available on the website if you want to print it off. And I want you to think about what it would be like to be on this gorgeous, calm, sunny beach. I feel like I'm going to be dreaming about it all day. Okay, so think about words and phrases which would describe it and the descriptions that you heard in the story. Now, here are some of my ideas to start you off. So I thought about that beautiful blue sea and thought about some synonyms instead of writing blue. So I've got sapphire sea, the azure sea, the cobalt, turquoise, cerulean. So I used a thesaurus to look up those different synonyms of blue, which again you can do on your you can do it online, or you might have a thesaurus in the house. Then I thought about those cliff paths. They're winding and twisting and curving. Now I know the gulls aren't making any noise, but I thought they might still be moving. So I've used some alliteration of gliding gulls. Those are things that I could see. I could hear those distant voices. So just the voices of the family, just in the background. The waves are swishing, splashing. Sea is lapping on the sand. The smell, might not be too many smells. There was a waft of pasties. They had pasties for their lunch, didn't they? And the salty sea air, that kind of tangy scent that you get when you're on the beach. And some ideas for things I could feel: scorching sand, the sand between my toes, the glistening smooth rocks, the cooling sea spray, the beating rays of the sun. It feels like it was a really hot day, doesn't it? And just a gentle breeze every now and then. So I'm sure you have got far more than I have put on there. That's just to get you started. So you can use a thesaurus, like I've said. Try and select some really exciting, ambitious language. Try and challenge yourselves. And maybe think to yourself, I'm going to try and find something which I don't think anybody else will have used. So pause the video for around 10 to 15 minutes to give yourself time to fill the boxes. And you might want to find some other pictures of beaches in Cornwall for inspiration, or if you've visited coves like this, you could use your images as inspiration. So pause the video and see how many different ideas you can pop in those boxes. Oops, I just seem to have stopped sharing. Ooh. Let's do that. Okay. Okay, so hopefully you've got some lovely language. I wish that we could share some of that, because I know that all of you would have some brilliant words and phrases to share that we could all use. So Cherry has been left on the beach to collect a few more shells to complete the necklace. Now we're going to read on now, and I want you to keep listening for how the beach is being described by the writer. So we're still thinking about what that beach looks like, what it sounds like, all of those senses. Had she not been so immersed in her search, sifting the shells through her fingers, she would have noticed that the dark grey bank of cloud rolling in from the Atlantic. She would have noticed the white horses gathering out at the sea, and the tide moving remorselessly in to cover the rocks between her and Boat Cove. When the clouds cut off the warmth from the sun as evening came on and the sea turned grey, she shivered with cold and put on her sweater and jeans. She did look up then and saw the angry sea, but she saw no threat in that and did not look back over her shoulder to Boat Cove. She was aware that time was running out, so she went down on her knees again and dug feverishly in the sand. She had to collect 30 more shells. It was the baleful sound of the foghorn somewhere out at sea beyond Gurnard's Head that at last forced Cherry to take some account of the incoming tide. She looked for the rock she would have to clamber over to reach Boat Cove again, and a winding track that would take her up the cliff path and safely. But they were gone. Where they should have been, the sea was already driving in against the cliff face. She was cut off. In a confusion of wonder and fear, she looked out to sea, at the heaving ocean that moved in towards her, seeing it now as a writhing, greying monster, breathing its fury on the rocks with every pounding wave. Still, Cherry did not forget her shells, but wrapping them inside her towel, she tucked them into her sweater and waded out through the surf towards the rocks. If she timed it right, she reasoned, she could scramble back over them and into the cove as the surf retreated. She reached the first of the rocks without too much difficulty. The sea here seemed to be protected from the force of the ocean by the rocks further out. Holding fast to the first rock she came to, and with the sea up around her waist, she waited for the next incoming wave to break and retreat. The wave was unexpectedly impotent and fell limply on the rocks around her. She knew her moment had come and took it. She was not to know that piling up far out at sea was the first of the giant storm waves that had gathered several hundred miles out in the Atlantic, bringing with it all the momentum and violence of the deep ocean. The rocks were slippery underfoot, and more than once Cherry slipped down into the seething white rock pools where she had played so often when the tide was out. But she struggled on until finally she had climbed high enough to be able to see the thin strip of sand that was all that was left of Boat Cove. It was only a few yards away, so close. Until now, she'd been crying involuntarily, but now, as she recognised the little path up through the bracken, her heart was lifted with hope and anticipation. She knew the worst was over, that if the sea would only hold back, she would reach the sanctuary of the cove. She turned and looked behind her to see how far away the next wave was, just to reassure herself that she had enough time. But the great surge of green water was upon her before she could register either disappointment or fear. She was hurled back against the rock below her and covered at once by the sea. She was conscious as she went down that she was drowning, but she still clutched her shells against her chest and hoped she had enough of them at last to finish the giant's necklace. Those were her last thoughts before the sea took her away. So, not sure if you were expecting that, but that beach has changed quite dramatically, hasn't it? So let's have a little look. So you can see here, this is a cove, and you can see the waves, that when it talks about the white horses, that's when the waves start to get a little bit frothy, and you can see it all swirling in. So we know that Boat Cove has got high cliffs, so if Cherry gets cut off, it's going to be very difficult for her to get away. And here, another picture of when the storm really comes in, and they describe the sea as that writhing monster. So it sounds like it's suddenly got very frightening. It's very stormy. The sky has completely changed. The sea has completely changed. Everything about that beach has altered from when we saw it as a lovely, calm, golden sanded, beautiful place to be sitting. So we're going to repeat the task, but we're looking for language to describe the beach as it changes and the storm rolls in, making it a dangerous, different place to be. So look at the pictures, and you might want to read pages 9, 10, and 11 again. You can scroll back in the video, or they're on the website if you wanted to open those up to read again. If you want some help getting started, some of my ideas. So we've got the mammoth waves, the dark grey clouds, churning dark water, the monstrous curling waves, torpedoes of water hurling themselves at the cliff. I could hear explosive waves crashing, the water bashing against the rock, the shudder of the beach. Sometimes when you're on the beach and a wave comes down, you sort of feel that vibration, that shudder through the sand. The waves are pounding, there's a rumble of low thunder, there's echoing cries. I thought that the birds would probably not be quite so quiet. They've got squawking seagulls, and the sea sort of sucking the pebbles back. You know that noise sometimes when when it's really strong waves. I might feel fear running through my veins. I feel drenched. It sounds like she's very wet, Cherry. The bitter slap and sting of the sea spray, and I might smell that danger in the air. So you can see those words are very different from the language that we were using to describe the first picture. So as before, spend between 10 and 15 minutes on this task, so you're able to really think about the language and explore synonyms in a thesaurus. You might want to look at some stormy sea pictures. Some of you might have been near the beach when it's been stormy and can think about how you describe the movement of the waves and the noise. It's very different than a beautiful, calm beach. Okay, so if you pause the video and continue with your task. So keep your word grid safe until Wednesday, and we'll see you tomorrow for a writing task. So enjoy the rest of your day and come back tomorrow.